After missed opportunities in this election campaign to select culturally and linguistically diverse candidates in Fowler and Parramatta, do you believe that more needs to be done to support and encourage minority representation in Australian politics going forward? If so, what do you believe should be done?
Catherine, how does Andrew Charlton from the eastern suburbs and Christina Keneally represent people of the western suburbs of Fowler and Parramatta? Well,
I think the first I'd say is that we do have a really diverse range of candidates in this election campaign.
The question was about Parramatta and Fowler, and diverse candidates were pushed aside so that two people could be parachuted in, and they're not from the area.
Well, I think first I'd say that Christina Keneally is an extraordinary politician, and she will be a fantastic member for Fowler. And Andrew Charlton is someone who will make a substantial contribution to, again, the federal parliament, both outstanding candidates, and there are pre-selection processes that are gone through, and that was the outcome of those processes. But I think, you are right, it does need to be a far more diverse representation in politics. In the 20 years I have been there, there have been more women. We are beginning to see more culturally diverse. The fact that we now have a First Nations caucus within the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party, Linda Burney, Patrick Dodson, Malandiri McCarthy, we're hoping to get Marion Scrimgeour up in Lingiari, is terrific. Sally Situ, I think, will make an enormous contribution. We've got...
Chowdhury would have made a contribution in Fowler. She was pushed aside. So
she wasn't pushed aside. There was a pre-selection process that was undertaken, and that's the outcome of that process.
But the question is why you can't develop local candidates who are diverse and represent very diverse electorates.
Which I think we actually have done, and that's what I'd say. Again, with Sally, we've got a candidate in Swan as well. Again, someone who I think will make a fantastic contribution from Western Australia, as well as a number of other candidates across the country. And I think there is diversity happening. It's slower than many of us would like. I understand that, but I think we are starting to see that.
Paul Fletcher, we had the quite bizarre incident this week with Fiona Martin in Reid, apparently mistaking Tu Lee, who had campaigned for pre-selection in Fowler, and Sally Situ, who is her rival for the seat of Reid. How do we explain that?
Well, look, Fiona has dealt with that, but we've seen a really strong reaction. We've seen a really strong reaction from the Labor Party because they are very sensitive on this point of parachuting in candidates from other parts of Sydney into Western Sydney. Andrew Charlton from his $16 million mansion in Bellevue Hill can't even name 3 restaurants in Parramatta. The big question for Christina Keneally is if she loses in Fowler, is she going to keep living there? I mean, that's a really interesting question.
I think what happened with Fiona Martin and Sally Situ, to be fair, was pretty appalling. And I think she could have dealt with it by apologising.
I think people in Western Sydney are pretty tired of being taken for granted by the Labor Party, quite frankly. And the Labor Party has taken Western Sydney for granted for a long time. It's taken Liberal National
Intifar's dying to say something here, and she can't get a word in. Intifar.
See, that's the problem of representation, which I'm trying to say something. So basically, we have a problem of representation in this country. Right now, it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful, and we're not addressing the question. The problem has been there for a very long time, and this is what people from minority groups, from equity groups, from marginalised groups, from young people, is that how long is it going to take for these problems to not be a problem? Maybe in the 1980s it was a problem. Right now it's a shame. When I live in Canberra, when I look over my shoulder, right, to the Parliament House, do I see any bits of myself? No. And that's shameful. I don't feel represented, and representation is a very big problem, especially among a disenchanted electorate.
I think there's two parts of it. The first is that they should be represented more from cultural backgrounds. The second is, why aren't more people from cultural backgrounds intending to enter politics? So I think what has to happen in addition...
I think they tried in Fowler, but Christina Keneally got the pre-selection.
I think that what should happen over a period of the next 10 years is we should be going into the schools and trying to interest the top people from all kinds of diverse cultures to want to be in politics. Because the question you've got to ask is, are the best people of any culture actually entering politics now? And we've got to dive in and...
That's a very, very good point, actually, Siimon. And let's forget about people from diverse culture. Let's talk about women, right? And we do an incredible job in pushing women from the parliament, right? If you look at just last year, look at the Jenkins Review, right? We do a ridiculously good job in scaring women away from politics. We can't even keep the halls of the parliament, which is meant to be a sanctuary for the rule of law, where 1 in 3 women are being harassed, bullied. Why would anyone want to be in politics where you could literally get raped?
Stan, can I ask you about whether you, in fact, would have any political ambition, whether it's something you could see in your own future?
Well, I think the question, more stands in the sense of representation. You know, I don't, you know, it's not necessarily, oh, you know, so-and-so or so-and-so wants to be in politics. But it's like, you know, I look at the example of, you know, 3 fantastic New York City councillors, Shahana Hanif, Linda Lee, Julie Wan. 3 random examples. They're not Australian. Shahana Hanif was the first Bangladeshi American on the New York City Council. Julie Wan and Linda Lee were the first Korean American women on the New York City Council. For me, what resonates with me is, you know, like, you know, young women of those cultures, they see this is, you know, they can see themselves in these people. They can see, I'm valued, I'm a part of the multicultural community, you know, and for me, that's what's important. I feel like, you know, representation, you know, in politics, you know, if politics is representative of the people, politics can work most effectively. I think for me, it's not really about, you know, whether I, you know, have an interest, but I, you know, feel valued as a part of the community when I can see the community in Parliament.
Stan, can I just pick up on that point? So with, you know, Gladys Liu as a member for Chisholm, for example, for the first Australian of Chinese background in that seat, you know, my electorate, 19% of people report being of Chinese background, 4% Indian, 3% Korean. That's very typical of many electorates across Australia. And so the more that people from non-Anglo backgrounds can look and see people like themselves in Parliament, I think the better. I'm pleased with some of the examples we have in our party room. I'd like to see more. But what's also important is attracting people into the parties, the political parties, because that's where most of the parliamentarians are drawn from. And you know, we've made some progress, but we've got work to do.